Hello everyone and welcome back to the Imagine Crafts channel. I'm Nicole Watt. I'm one of the designers for 2020 and I'm really happy to be here to share this card design with you today. So today I'm going to show you how I created this great background. I'm using all of these fantastic Sukaneko inks, and the cool thing about inks these days is that they do more than just stamp on paper. I used to use a lot of backgrounds that had designer papers and things like that, but now I find that I'm creating more of my own custom backgrounds because inks are so versatile. So one of the things that I do when I get new inks is I always swatch them out. And these are both the Delicata Champagne and the MementoLUXE Nautical Blue. And I've swatched these out on watercolor paper because I want to see how they're going to react to watercolor. And both of these pigment inks can be mixed with water and used as a watercolor. VersaFine Clair, on the other hand, is designed not to react with water because you can use it to stamp outline images and color them in with watercolors. So you won't be able to use this one to watercolor, but we'll be using it to create the sentiment. So let's get started and I'll show you how to use these inks in a fun new way. Okay, so I'm all ready to get started here, and I have my inks and a palette. Sometimes I smushed right onto my glass surface, but because I'm using a hardboard today, I will use a palette. So you can use a plastic palette like this, or your glass mat, or any other plasticky kind of surface or glass surface that you can smush your inks onto. So I've got my watercolor paper on this hardboard, like I said, because I want to make sure that it remains flat because I'll be using my heat tool to dry in between. So I cut the piece larger and put my tape around the edges, and then I always make a line so that way I know where my finished surface is going to be and I don't extend beyond it if I don't want to. So I've got my watercolor brush and some water. So let's get started. So I'm going to take my nautical blue here and I'm just going to smush it on the plastic. And then I can just grab some water and activate it. See how that turns into a really great watercolor? So I'm just going to go ahead and take some cleaned water here. It doesn't matter that I've got a little bit of blue in there because it's going to become more blue in a minute here, but this is going to help keep the water in place. And I'm just going to grab some of that color and just start putting it in place. Now the more water that I use, the more movement I'm going to get. You see how I have all this movement up here? And then I just extend it as far as I want it to end. And then what I'm going to do is dry this up so that way I can put a second layer on here that will be darker. All right, so now that this is dry, you can see how beautiful that wash looks. So I could leave it this way, or if I want to make it more dramatic, I can add more ink in here and put a second layer on. Now I'm not pre-washing it, I'm just going to add this layer in because I want to see those zigzags. And that's going to give us this darker color. So now I can add a little bit more water if I want to get some movement in here, but it's going to give us these layers and it really adds to the depth of the design. And you're going to see these little swishes back and forth, which I think is really what brings a project to life when you start layering your watercolors like this. So we'll heat and then we'll do some distressing. All right, now that I have that second layer in place, I'm going to go ahead and start working on some distressing. So just get some more water to make this really nice and loose, and I'm going to load up my brush with tons of it, and then I'm just going to spatter it just by hitting the end of the brush, and that's going to get me that awesome spattery look. And if I want some bigger spatters, I can just add more water and just kind of get that done like so. And at this point I have a choice to let this air dry or again to use my heat tool. Alright, so now that this is dry, you can see how beautiful that looks. I could leave it just like this and be perfectly happy with this design, but I thought I would add some shimmer, and even though this is a blue card and it could very easily be a masculine card, I don't think there's anything wrong with adding a little bit of shimmer. Guys like shimmery stuff too. So I'm going to take this Delicata, the champagne color, and do the same process. So this is some clean water, And you can see that this mixes up into a gorgeous shimmery medium. And I'm just going to go ahead and do some of the spatter, because that's all this really needs, is just a little bit of glittery spatter on here. And that is beautiful. And again, I'm just going to heat this up and then I'll be able to cut down the panel. Alright, so this panel is now complete and cut down, ready to be adhered to a card base. So I'm going to set this aside for a moment and do the sentiment up. I'm using the It's Your Birthday and birthday add-ons from the Stamp Market. And I already have my stamps set up here. Because I'm going to die cut them, I'm just going to throw in a piece of white cardstock and use my VersaFine Clair Nocturne. Of course, I could use a blue shade or even a brown shade, but I really like the way that black pops against navy blue like this. So just stamp these up. I almost don't need a stamp positioner because the VersaFine Clair really does give me a great impression the very first time. So that's what we've got. And look at how gorgeous that is. So this will be very easy for me to just go ahead and die cut out with the accompanying dies. Alright, so I have my sentiments cut out and I already started adding some of the adhesive. I like to use these 1/8 inch adhesive strips, and I just cut little pieces from it so I can pull them off and add them to the back here. These 1/8 inch strips are perfect because they just fit on these without showing through the back. So I have all of those done, and I'm just going to go ahead and adhere my card base, or my card panel to my card base here, this beautiful watercolored panel. And I like to get this right up into the corner and then down the edge, and then just match up my edges here. That way, if there is any overhang, I can just go ahead and trim it off very easily. Using a liquid glue is helpful because it allows me to move the panel around a little bit if I need to before it sets permanently. Alright, so I can see that I have a little bit of excess here, but I'll be able to trim that off later. And now all I have to do is add my sentiment. So these guys actually probably take longer to peel off than most of the rest of the process in creating this card. And that's okay. If you didn't want to do this, of course you could adhere these guys right to the card, but I really think that it looks fun with it popped up, and I'm kind of putting it at a nice little jaunty angle for something different. Alright, there we go. You see how quick this came together. It really doesn't take long to do this technique, and you'll end up with a beautiful custom one-of-a-kind background every time you do this kind of technique. I hope you enjoyed learning about a different way to use your Tsukaneko inks and that you give it a try sometime soon. I'll be back soon with another video, but until next time, happy crafting!